Welcome up, everyone.
Welcome, welcome.
Hello, hello.
All right. Okay. Welcome everyone to the seventh episode of MEV Space. So, MEV Space brings together the sharpest minds in crypto to dissect the evolving MEV landscape. You can search MEV Space on Spotify, Pocket Cast, and Apple Podcasts to listen to our previous episodes about sandwich attack, TEE, searchability integration, and much more. So today we are diving deep into one of the most critical questions shaping the future of Ethereum, MEV. So how does partial block building reshape stakeholder dynamics across the entire MEV supply chain? And what does this mean for the economic evolution towards REV? From validators optimizing their APR to builders managing inclusion risks, so from searchers adapting their strategies to protocols balancing competing interests. So partial block building is shifting power dynamics in ways we are only begin to understand. So we got an incredible lineup of experts today, representing each layer of this ecosystem, and they'll be challenged by some tough questions. So let's unpack how this technology is redistributing value and influence across the chain. Now let's get started. I think we can start by the speakers here to do a brief introduction about themselves and their involvement in the partial block building. Okay, let's start from Danny.
Hey, yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Danny. I'm with Figment, and I'm really happy to be here. My purview is into supporting the existing protocols and networks and liquid staking solutions that we support here at Figment. Pre-confirmations, partial block building, something that certainly is kind of top of mind for us, and something that we're very closely monitoring and tracking and very excited about. So I'll let somebody else maybe introduce themselves. Irfan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. My name's Irfan. I'm a founder at Interstate. We're working on we're a pre-conf protocol, so we're effectively working on enabling ultra-fast confirmations on mainnet. We're testing at scale on Hootie right now with just about every validator on Ethereum, or every validator operator, every major large validator operator on Ethereum. And yeah, we'd love to have more operators sign on. So if anyone's listening, yeah, we're a pre-conf protocol and working on part of the block building stack. I'll let someone else take it over from here.
Yeah, Kobe, would you mind to introduce yourself? Thank you.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Hey everyone, I'm Kubi. I'm the co-founder of Gattaca. So we mostly focus on building high-performance Ethereum infrastructure. Historically, mainly focused on block production. And as part of that, we operate one of the largest block builders on Ethereum called Titan. And we also operate a bunch of other infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Next is Jesse.
Hey, yeah, great to be here with you all. So my name's Jesse. I'm on the product side at Bloxroute. Bloxroute's essentially an infrastructure player focusing on very low latency transaction and block propagation, as well as very fast data discovery. And we work with all the block builders, all the validators. We operate some really critical relays and work on a bunch of different chains. So yeah, really excited to dive into the details.
And then I'm Ben. I'm the co-host here for MEV Space. We're excited here to have the partial block building POV from all of the different actors in the space. Huge stacked lineup. I work over at BTCS. We're a block builder. We're publicly traded on NASDAQ. Just building fun stuff in Ethereum.
Awesome. So yeah, let's start from these few questions. So first one is I'd like everyone to inform the audience here of your understanding of partial block building, and you can give one misconception about partial block building you're coming here. So how about we start from Jesse?
Yeah, sure thing. So the way that I look about this, if you start at a high level, kind of going back like Ethereum before the merge, let's say, there was a validator or a miner who kind of did everything. They created their blocks, they proposed their blocks. Then, we moved a little bit further away to help separate the roles at play in the pipeline, and there was PBS, and builders became their own entity and started building the blocks, giving it to the proposers. And that's the point that we're at now, where really builders construct the entire block themselves and deliver those to proposers to give to the network. And partial block building, I think, almost decentralizes or shares the responsibility of building a block so that it's not centralized by a single entity that has control over all the transactions in a single block, so that there are multiple parties that can contribute and take part in the value extraction that's involved in blocks, and contribute towards building it. I'd say one of the misconceptions that may exist is that the concept of partial block building weakens the performance of builders or kind of makes execution fragmented. And I think in reality, all it does is really increases competition for strategic places in the block. So, at the top of the block, more competitive than lower down in most cases. And it also empowers validators to now take part in the extraction or protection of value in the tail end of the block. So it doesn't eliminate builder value, it just changes how it's accessed and shared.
Okay, cool. Next, Irfan.
Sure. I think Flashbot Swab is like kind of a form of like partial block building, as I see it. Like, yeah, obviously they're a great R&D firm, and they've kind of partnered with like one of the major builders to kind of like enable like yeah, they're partnered with like I think 3 entities right now: Flashbots, Beaver, and Nethermind. And I think the idea there is that like they enable like multiple people to run the like the physical builder inside of a TEE. And what that does is you at least know that like it somewhat lessens the trust assumptions, because at least the physical block builder itself is being run by more than one party. That's one vision for how how to like let multiple parties be involved in constructing a block. I think pre-comps are another, where like you effectively enable the validator to have some say in like what's included in the block. You give the validator more options as to what's included, while still giving yeah, and while still maintaining the current block auction. So the current parties that are winning the blocks will still win the blocks. You're just giving the validators a little bit more of a say. Yeah, I think like in my mind, these two are like the two different options for what the NC partial block building look like.
Yeah, well, what's one of the? Would you please give an example of one of the like myths about partial block building, Irfan?
What's up? Sorry, do you want to repeat it?
The misconceptions you hear people talking about partial block building.
Yeah. In terms of misconceptions, yeah, I think in terms of like maybe like MEV extraction, there won't be. I don't think there'll be any more MEV extracted than there is today. I don't think it. Yeah, first off, yeah, I don't think there'll be more MEV extracted than there is today. I don't think in terms of like giving everyone a fair playing field, I think that's obviously pretty important. Not like advantaging certain parties, like not giving like the validator more control or the relay or whoever more control than there is today. And I think there's been like a lot of design work. Like work on this has been ongoing for like a year. It's maybe deploying a little bit slowly, but that's because like you want to make sure it's fair when it goes to prod.
Okay, Kubi, what's your viewpoint about this?
Yep. So yes, let's start with basically my definition of what partial block building is. So just take you one step back. First of all, like my definition of what a block is within the context of a blockchain is basically just a sequence of transactions that basically form a batched state update to the ledger. And then when we talk about monolithic block building, it's essentially that you have one entity that is solely involved in determining what this final sequence of transaction is. And then when we talk about partial block building, we basically now have multiple parties that are involved in determining what the final sequence of transactions are that basically form this batched state update to the ledger. Then in regards to the second part of the question, common misconceptions. So I think for me personally, I would say the number one misconception is actually that currently block production is done in a monolithic way, and i.e. that the block builder today via PBS is the only entity that is involved in constructing the block. So that's already not true, and I'll double click on why. So just based on my definition, you already have multiple actors that are involved in building the block, and you have multiple types of constraints that are imposed on block builders. And it starts with a very simple sort of constraint, which is basically OFAC filtering policy. So validators already basically tell builders that, hey, there's certain types of transactions that you cannot include in the block. And the entity involved is obviously the validator. But then secondly, since inception, basically, and the creation of the bundle primitive by Flashbots, you essentially already have like this structure of like a sequence of transactions that you need to include, where either you need to guarantee the exact sequence, or you need to even guarantee that the transaction executes and doesn't revert, and a bunch of other things. And so in today's block production world, sometimes, just speaking from experience, you already have sometimes entities sending us these mega bundles that sometimes contain hundreds of transactions. And so basically, this massively obviously constrains what the final block output looks like. And so you already have some form of partial block buildings where you have like significant parts of the block that are predetermined prior to the finalization, and then you just shuffle it over to the builders in order to finalize the total block that gets bid out in the and then proposed or shuffled over to the relays and then to the proposers. Yeah, that's my view.
Awesome. So yeah, next, Danny.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with all that. I think like one, if it's okay, I'd like to like kind of posit a question here of like, is there like, do we see any impact to kind of like almost the permissionless nature of Ethereum by this partial block building? Like, if you, for specifically looking at like pre-confirmations, if you can ensure or almost guarantee inclusion in a block, that also then means that someone might potentially, right, if the block's full, be excluded from the block, and then ergo, like, I'm just curious. While I'm very much in support of partial block building and pre-confirmations, I'm just curious if like how we think that shapes, redefines the overall like Ethereum network. And I just want to like put that question out there to everyone here.
Can you repeat the question really quick?
Yeah, like I guess like do we see a potential impact in allowing like pre-confirmations and partial block building to ensure individuals have, let's say, like early access to blocks, and then ergo potential individuals are excluded from that particular block, or even sequential blocks, and then ergo have less access to participate in the network, or almost are like disadvantaged, right? I guess this kind of goes back to like the same concept of like priority fees and inclusion fees. So I'm just curious about like if anyone has any thoughts there.
It's actually really related to the next question. Let me queue up the next question, and I think it should touch on exactly what you're looking for here. And then we'll go through the list of speakers with that. So specifically, the next question is: execution layer pre-confirmations can amplify MEV related risks, especially when a single actor controls sequencing rights. What safeguards, such as like encryption, like encrypted mempools, or slashing for malicious behavior, help protect the network against this threat? So, Danny, I think that kind of covers the question you're asking, right?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, totally, it does.
Perfect. We'll start with Kubi on that, and then we'll go through the list.
Sure. So I think similar to what everyone said at the beginning, I think pre-confirmation in general introduce an additional actor that is now part of having a say in what goes into the final block. So just from that perspective, it should increase the censorship resistance, i.e., it shouldn't disadvantage certain players or users from getting access to block space. So it should, from my perspective, be net positive in regards to that specific property. However, with the introduction of an additional player, especially with an additional player with a privileged position, so to speak, you also introduce, I guess, additional trust assumptions, for example. So given that that's, let's say, a specific entity, whether you call it a gateway or a pre-confer, or maybe it's the validated directly, is if that entity is issuing, let's say, execution pre-confirmations, they can have almost final say over the entirety of the block, or potentially could even not allow any outside builders to construct a block. They could just construct a block in its entirety. So from that perspective, if it ends up being in that state, then it could be net negative. But in general, like given the current market structure designs that have been worked on over the past year, it's looking more like there'll be it will be an additional role, and that entity will leverage the existing supply chain. So there should be more actors. Yeah, and then I guess in terms of the trust assumption specifically, given that they're in a privileged role, they can obviously also impact MEV itself and either capture, extract value directly themselves. And then again, depending how exactly the market structure is designed, there could be incentives to do so or not. So I think the devil is always in the detail with those kind of things.
Awesome, thank you. Danny, the question's queued up for you if you want to answer it, or we can move on to Irfan.
I'll take this one. I think in terms of, because I'm working on this. Yeah, I think in terms of those are great points. I think some of the so the first is on kind of like the position that the pre-confirmer themselves take on. We're effectively just granted, unlike the proposer, which has like a strict monopoly on the block, the pre-confer is like very easily swappable. So it's almost the pre-confer themselves don't have like a privileged. It doesn't really have the pre-conf protocol itself is like kind of easily replaceable by another one. So it's not as much of a privileged position as like literally the proposer, which has a 12 slot monopoly. So in effect, I think in effect, the pre-confer is kind of like an entity just acting on behalf of the proposer, which already has a monopoly position. Like every 12 seconds, a different proposer has a monopoly on the block. And then usually I think where value accrues in MEV is to these like two entities which have like large network effects or like kind of monopolies, have like or like network oriented monopolies, which the proposer has in this case because they literally own the block. So I think like we'll just see MEV start moving more and more towards the proposer, and then eventually towards the like the source of the order flow. So like if you're an app generating order flow, like that's kind of your MEV, like that's your order flow. You can submit it anywhere. So I think this is like a little bit of a start of the MEV moving towards the proposer, because the proposer effectively has like full say over the pre-confer protocol acts like on behalf of the proposer, but the proposer I think has the largest network effect here. So I think value in this case accrues towards the proposer for the most part.
Cool. Jesse, you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I agree with kind of everything that's said. I do think that the great benefit here is just what was touched on in the fact that MEV does now or will now get distributed amongst different players. So yes, this is moving more towards the proposer when in the monolithic block building situation, a lot of that can be just kind of kept by the builder, and by introducing mechanisms such as this, which allows the redistribution of MEV, it kind of just strengthens the supply chain. If there are ways to feed that back and incentivize transaction source creators, then if there's MEV that flows back to them and gets distributed in a more even way across the supply chain, I think that's a net good thing. And implementations or mechanisms that promote that kind of direction, I stand behind. But yeah, I think everything was covered really well.
Awesome. All right, I think we're ready for the next question, Brian.
Oh yeah, sure. The next question is for Danny. So, for Figment, so why is the partial block building important to you? And which validator KPI, such as APR uplift, bit variance, risk exposure, that could improve most with partial block building and Figment?
Yeah, it's like a really good question. So I think from like just representing the validator side, partial block building to us aligns with our overarching thesis that consensus layer rewards are ultimately going to be more compressed and go down, especially as we see the entrance of, let's say, like new net new stakers, most likely through like ETPs and other institutions. Most recently with the SEC providing at least some clarity in the United States on like, is staking, does that constitute a security? And just there is no. So we anticipate a lot of like ETPs to migrate from spot to more staking for ETH specifically. And I think with that, again, and just overall, we see stake increase on the Ethereum network. I think you'll see consensus layer rewards decrease, as well as I think going back to the last question, another thesis that we have is that the proposer and or even the application will start to benefit, application layer will start to benefit more from MEV rewards. And so with a combination of consensus rewards going down and the increase of execution rewards, as well as the shift to the application and or proposer level, I think that we have to at Figment have to consistently, and validators as a whole have to consistently challenge ourselves to say, like, where do we could potentially increase the value we provide to stakers, i.e. staking rewards rate, APY, whatever, we say SRR, staking rewards rate, but like whatever terminology you want to use for return on staking, right? And I think that we see partial block building as potentially like a new entrant. And I think we're extremely excited by the opportunity to have these new value accrual mechanisms where there's basically an increase on real economic value generated from networks. So I think for us, like when we think about what that looks like and, what are the key KPIs, I think ultimately increasing the proportion or the ratio of execution rewards compared to consensus rewards is probably one of the most like paramount or important things to us. I think, there are some like concerns, and I think we kind of we touched on those, right? And I think like to the key takeaways, like the devil will be in the details. We do see some like risks, in being one of the largest independent institutional stakers on the Ethereum network. We think it's extremely important to try to like contribute net positively to the network. And I think we'd all recognize the nuance of MEV, right? There's good, there's bad, right? What do they say? Like the forest of MEV and Ethereum, right? So like it is important to us that as we go down this path, that like we continue to work with some of the incredible individuals and organizations on this panel, which we have very close relationships with, and work with, to continue to try to make sure that we do this in a very intentional way, right? Because one thing that kind of some of the risks would potentially concern us is if we start to build mechanisms or support mechanisms that proliferate what I think we all recognize as like bad MEV, right? And of course there's good and then there's neutral. So I think just making sure that we continue to try to work in ethos and alignment and establish, like, I wouldn't say like the standards, but like the operating, I guess it's like more of the objectives of what we're trying to build. We're making these systems are more efficient without necessarily like punishing those those players or those participants in the network that with bad MEV, basically, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So again, I think just trying to like close it out, I think it's like extremely important because it helps increase the execution layer rewards and most likely provide more value or higher return for staked capital to our customers. And I think some of the KPIs is ultimately like, what is that real economic value that staking, like what is the uplift hopefully to overall staking rewards rates? And yeah, so I think that's probably like the one thing that we're the most focused on there.
Awesome, great answer. All right, this question's for Jesse here. Which of the current PBB solutions, so partial block building solutions, do you prefer and why? like, can you clarify whether you're more interested in inclusion-related features or execution-related features?
Yeah, so where kind of Blockshot sits, we, prefer solutions that prioritize network liveness and obviously, enhance fairness and there are no sort of monopolies at any stage of the pipeline or life cycle. So stuff like eigenlayer style partial auctions where top of the block priority space is, given the option to get included there is given to different parties, and then the like T-based collaborative builds where it kind of brings all the components together. These are uh, ideal, and we focus on inclusion. So solutions like the eigenlayer one, they enforce the builder proposer commitments like via slashing, and this is an effective thing. But they obviously also introduce operational complexity, and latency comes with that as well. And that's really where Blockshot can kind of fit in and help to mitigate these issues that are introduced while still supporting the overall objectives of them. And then also the T-based solutions, because they have very strong execution integrity, but also obviously that comes with like throughput trade-offs. Ultimately, whichever specific solution lands up becoming dominant, or there's a fair distribution of interest and activity amongst different ones, our role is to really optimize the data parts and ensure that bundle bids or partial block headers and proposer suffixes and all the different components move as fast and reliably through the network, get where they need to go as quickly as possible. So overall, I'd say we're fairly agnostic on the types of solutions. There are ones that appear to fit in with good ideologies of what we kind of like about the blockchain, but ultimately we just want to be there to make sure that at the point in which this all comes together, things are as efficient and optimized as they can be, so the network stays alive and blocks keep on getting put together and proposed.
Okay, cool. So next question is for Kubi. So, you guys building Titan, so you must have a lot of different data indexes and dashboards kind of stuff to measure the success of block building. So, what do you think the metrics that be important to use to measure the success of partial block building?
Yeah, sure. So I think before we can talk about the metrics or like how to measure the success of partial block building, we first need to define or have some sort of goals that, or what, just call out what we're trying to achieve with partial block building. So I can talk about it from our perspective. And so from our perspective, the key things that partial block building brings to the table is one, censorship resistance. And that's just due to the fact that, as said before, you now have multiple entities that determine the final like sequence of transactions that make up the block. And so you no longer, or you lessen the points of centralization, and hence one entity being able to potentially censor the input for a specific block. The other clear sort of value add we see that partial block building has is basically more efficient consumption of block space itself. And very tightly coupled with that is also then just overall higher block rewards. And the reason that is just because of the way the current market structure basically is incentivizing participants. You currently have this dynamic where order flow is basically becoming more exclusive as time progresses. And this basically was just rooted in some of the early history of PBS, when some of the largest block builders like Beaver Builder or Rsync were like all these sophisticated trading firms that were generating a lot of order flow and were only exclusively sending their transactions to their builders. And the reason was that there's a clear incentive given the current market structure that if you only send value to one builder, you basically don't have to send all that value to the proposer, and you can keep some of the value to yourself or basically refund it to the originator. In that case, in case of a vertically integrated builder, you basically have the originator, which is the CX stacks or like CFI DeFi, arbitrager firm, and the block builder being the same entity. And so that kind of started this almost this snowball effect of anyone that wants to compete in that arena needs to also start getting exclusive order flow. Otherwise, there basically isn't a chance to really compete on a grander scale. And that has basically then led to a situation where for a given block, not all order flow that is a potential candidate for inclusion for a specific slot actually being available to all builders, which then means that there's a certain builder that will win a block, and there'll be a certain amount of gas in the block that is not being used. That will end up being the winning block, even though there are other transactions that could actually be contenders for that specific block. So then, how does this tie back to partial block building? So if you had some sort of market structure where you have these different entities that have their different sources of order flow, and then being able to essentially contribute to the final block, and each entity being able to capture some value in that process, that then net just unlocks more efficient usage of gas, which then makes block consumption more efficient, but also then just the total overall block reward obviously is also higher. And so those would be some of the key, I think, improvements or like goals that I would say if partial block building becomes a thing and becomes a success. Those would be the key things that like we would measure, and in terms of metrics, then those things are then very simple to measure. For example, censorship, just looking at how often transactions that are actually valid candidates for inclusion get included and how fast. You can also have metrics around additional value that's over blocks that were constructed using multiple entities, so partial block building versus having only one entity involved. You can even look at metrics around just gas consumption of partially built blocks that are then merged versus monolithically built blocks. Yeah, so those would be some of the things that we would look at.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. Irfan, we have one more question for you. How do you balance all of the different interests of different roles in PPP?
Sure. Yeah. I think Kiwi mentioned earlier, I think the goal is to like capture more of the available MEV. So like today, like a certain percentage of the total available MEV is captured. Only like a subset of the total available MEV is captured. Yeah, it's very hard to capture 100% of all MEV. If you have like more entities involved in block building, ideally some of those entities have like ideally some of those entities are also somewhat sophisticated and can capture MEV that the other ones aren't. So you have the ability to capture like more net MEV, which for everyone in this space at least is a good thing. I think the idea is to effectively capture more of the surface area of what's available. So if you have like if there's a universe in which like multiple block builders could kind of work together, in that case, you can probably capture more net than what's available today. So it should make like everyone in this it should make composers more profitable, make builders and relays more profitable as well. And then maybe if apps are involved, that value can be refunded to users. Yeah, I think the other consideration in this is like the growth of L2s. Obviously, like L2 volumes have been growing really, like obviously L2 execution volume has been growing really fast relative to L1 volume. And I think the idea is that L2s L2s have like our single block builder machines always. So like every L2 is just built. The block is built by whoever runs the L2 the L2 sequencer. And in that case, you have like effectively just a single block builder for every L2, for basically every L2, you have like effectively a single block builder there. And the idea is that like if we can kind of improve partial block building, we can do it for not just L2s, but for L1, but also L2s. And the idea there is to kind of like increase the censorship resistance of L2s. You can be more confident that your block was you can be more confident there's no censorship going on. Like obviously censorship at an L2 level is like a non-attributable fault. It's very hard to detect censorship at an L2 level. And then also you like as like governments kind of become more sophisticated, there's also like really strong legal pressure. Like if you're based in the like for example like DYDX, one of the reasons like they failed is because they're based in New York and they couldn't do what like they couldn't operate as an L2 anymore. They had to like they couldn't operate as an L2 because of like legal pressure. Um, so as like kind of like as like governments just like start understanding more about crypto, and like L2 like the region the L2 is based in becomes kind of like a attack vector. Like if your L2 is based in the US, you need to censor like certain parties. If you're based in other regions, you need to censor other parties. With partial block building on L1, with block building on L1 at least, it's very hard for like any government like the US to censor like the L1 for the Ethereum L1, but it's very easy for like the US government to like go censor like a single L2, because you know what the core team is. If partial block building becomes better and we can kind of like reuse the the censorship resistance of the L1 block building pipeline, we can also apply to L2s and kind of increase the censorship resistance of L2s. And this is really important because it lets this is really important because the legal attack vector on L2s is like a very common and well-known one. There's also other things like there's also other things like 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 uh like reducing like the centralizing effects of like having a single signature L2. And the idea is that we also want to be involved in kind of applying like we want to be involved in applying partial block building to like as many L2s as possible. Yeah.
Awesome. Now it comes. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was it. Sorry.
Okay. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So now we coming to our next last question. So everybody kind of heard of the latest buzzword REV, right? So how do you think it's gonna change the partial block building's implementation? So I think we can still start from Irvin.
Yeah, could you repeat the question?
So the REV. So how do you think REV is gonna change the partial block building's implementation?
Yeah, my understanding of rev is it's just like a new measure for like it's a way to kind of like DCF blockchains. You're kind of like, okay, what's the rev of like Solana versus Ethereum versus like Bitcoin. I think rev is kind of like interesting measure. Just yeah. So the way partial block building affects the rev of say Ethereum is that I think one, like I mentioned earlier, I think it can increase the surface area of what's available. So right now you have like competing block building where like every block builder needs to compete with one another, and only the one that's the best wins. However, it's I think today it's probably the case that like for example like Beaver has even if they don't win the block, they have like probably some order flow. They have some insight into the block that maybe another builder doesn't have, and vice versa. So even if I'm the winning builder, there's probably some MEV that the second biggest builder was extracting that I was unaware of. So if there was a way for us to kind of like credibly extract our value, if there's a way for like both of these builders to kind of like work together while still preserving the censorship resistance. Right today, you don't want like the builders for everyone to collude, because then like they could be colluding and censoring, and it decreases the censorship resistance. But if there's a way to like preserve the censorship resistance properties on L1, but still have the builders kind of like permissionlessly cooperate to build a block, what you'll have is greater rev on Ethereum, because this will increase the surface area of capturable MEV. And that's like the good case. That's the ideal case. In the ideal case, we like increase Ethereum's rev if we enable like a working partial block building structure. And also I think like the current block building, like the auctions was kind of like invented by Flashbots, like an excellent firm. They've done like a ton of great things, but then it hasn't changed for a very long time. So I think like this is like kind of like one of the new and exciting things, and it's good for Ethereum to kind of innovate. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, Kubi, what do you think of REV? And how do you think it's gonna change PBB or PBB change REV?
Sure. So I don't have a strong personal view of like how accurate that metric is in terms of valuing a blockchain ecosystem. But I guess in general, REV is like a sum of transaction fees and MEV, and so obviously MEV is one of the critical components here, which is affected by partial block building. As I said previously, I think partial block building should net unlock more value, both in terms of like a more effective consumption of block space, but also in terms of overall block rewards. So in that sense, that should bolster the number, whatever that metric is. So from that perspective, it should have a positive reflection in terms of REV. But then I guess another component of partial block building is that MEV as sort of this like big set of value that can be captured. Can be captured at different parts of the stack. And a big trend has been actually that MEV is moving more away from the validator to the user. And then you have different entities in between that capture a piece of the pie as well. And that just makes it a lot more difficult to measure accurately and quantify. So I guess the other trade-off here is how accurate can you actually measure MEV and then arrive at like accurate REV values.
Yeah, very intriguing. Yeah, so next we have Jesse. So what's your response to the question?
Yeah, it's super interesting. So, this REV is made up of like Kubi just said, of the MEV that's captured and the transaction fees. And if you look at how the question was framed, like how is PBB going to actually affect this on the chain? So first of all, I think you look at both of those components. So, what effect will partial block building have on MEV and have on transaction fees? I think the point earlier that was made is on MEV. I think it's really it was an interesting point where there might be certain entities that are able to capture more MEV out of a single opportunity or from an opportunity that someone else wasn't able to capture. And if if it was a single builder putting together the whole block, even if they won the block, they might have not won that specific opportunity. So I think on an aggregate, that would result in higher MEV being accrued in total. In terms of how it affects the overall metric, because like what was just mentioned, the value is now it sort of will accrue more stably or flatly, in if you think of it as a curve across all the different participants. You probably won't have the same idea of like priority gas fee auctions to try and get higher up in the block. Like there'll be now different players who bid for those uh strategic locations in a block, and maybe uh transaction fees won't land up spiking so high if transactions offer enough MEV or enough MEV can be extracted from them. So I think what I'm trying to say is the dynamic will change. I also think, just because the mechanisms will now be different in terms of how final blocks are constructed, that fact in itself will result in super smart people coming up with a lot of different strategies to extract MEV in ways that maybe wasn't completely possible before. um I'm just thinking like in general, if you're thinking of stuff like maybe uh cross-chain arbitrage in a more atomic way, something like pre-confs make that a lot more possible. If you can get confirmation that your transaction on either chain is going to go through, there'll be more maybe capital allocated to those kinds of strategies because the risk will be a lot lower. So I think there'll be new strategies that take place which could result in more value getting extracted. There'll probably be trade-offs on both ends. So I would take it as a net positive, in the sense that more value will accrue and it'll also get distributed more evenly across all the different players.
Yeah, seems like a bright future. So yeah, Danny, so what do you think of REV?
Yeah, I mean, you know, not to be like on a one-track record here, but I think it goes back exactly what I say earlier. I think we would like to, or we hope, and our thesis is that over time, consensus rewards on Ethereum go down, and we're already seeing this on other networks. Then that accordingly, like the real economic value most likely presents one of the biggest ways for us to make up of that loss of the consensus rewards. And I think that REV, while not the sole metric, or even I would say like the single point of guiding principle of like the true value of block space on a chains, I think it is at least a solid indicator or a KPI, right, of that. And so I think we're extremely excited by the promise and the evolution of Ethereum to move into this partial block building and just find more ways to again shift the MEV capture or REV capture from let's say solely like the validators and the block builders and everything of the like to be more even like shared at the application layer. And I think again that leads to an increase of revenue in ways that aren't really fully realized today. Again, I think though that at the same time the SRR for ETH, the staking rewards rate, I think it's like 3.5. It's kind of been there for quite some time now. I think that continues to go down though over time on the whole, unless partial block building becomes unless like our thinking is that partial block building outpaces what we potentially forecast it to be. I think we're just like extremely early in this first phase, but it's all really exciting stuff. I think it certainly leads to a more performant and let's say like there's I guess it's a lot of like benefits to moving towards partial block building. And I think that there's a lot of really cool primitives being built on top of pre-confirmations and really everything of the like. So I think again, like it helps our business. I think it ultimately will help make up the losses that we see in the consensus rewards. So yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. So I think partial block building is definitely have a lot of potentials for everybody to discover. And also there's not a very concrete solution at the moment, I think, but we all can having a very positive mindset about this whole development. So I'd like to thank you all the speakers here. So thank you for your sharing on this very interesting and very critical topic. And hopefully we can talk more about REV and other block building related topics in the future. Okay, thank you guys.
All right, awesome.
Thanks for joining,
guys.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye, everyone.